Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Back to Basics, Reconnecting to the Essence of You. My guest today is Eddie Wilson, a serial entrepreneur who has launched over 125 companies and successfully exited 90 of them and managed over 6,000 people. According to financial experts, he has generated over 1.2 billion in value, which has earned him the nickname of King of Exits. A self-defined altruist, he likes to better be known by the impact he has had on the people he's engaged with. He's the co-founder of the Aspire Tour, creator of the Empire Operating System, host of the Impact Podcast, author of the Title Leadership. It is not surprising that he gets invited to keynote events all over the world, where his impact resonates through the massive philanthropic initiatives he gets involved with. I am beyond excited to have him here. Eddie, thank you so much for being part of Back to Basics.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here today.
Well, I think in doing the research, I was lucky to see you in action at one of the Aspire events where I got invited by coincidence. I admit I wasn't familiar with it, but I always say yes to things that inspire. And I'm so happy I did because it was, broke all my expectations.
Good.
And I think the work you're doing, it's incredible. And I say, wow, this is somebody I would love to have on the podcast. And to credit to you, I reached out to few of the speakers, and you were the only one that even acknowledged my email, which I think shows the humanity in you. Everything I've done, research I've done in you. It really, I think leadership comes from remembering where you come from, what you do at the very beginning. And I've been lucky and privileged to have guests such as Seth Godin and Tammy Simon and some of the big CEOs that you also think they're never going to say yes to a smaller podcast. And it's incredible how true leadership shows, in my opinion, on the people that say yes. So thank you for that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. And so, Eddie, I know that you've been on so many podcasts and people want to know how to make money. Everybody loves money. Of course, I do too. I am more interested on the Back to Basics podcast about how we stay connected to what makes us tick and the journey. And so right there, I'm always eager to ask about the origin story. If you can share with us about your family, your upbringing, and if the younger Eddie ever thought that this is what you would be doing at this point in your life.
Yeah, I grew up in an entrepreneurial home. My father was a business owner. My mother's a business owner. And so running businesses definitely came honest and came natural, just watching the progression of my parents. But the one thing that I learned kind of growing up was my parents, they really came from humble beginnings and really struggled in their early entrepreneurial journey. And so as a child, watching your parents struggle and then find success, you learn so much. Like you learn, like I watched them struggle and climb the mountaintop, and I watched them, take negative hits and be resilient and stick it out. And, so it's like you just learn so much. And I learned, I always say the greatest gift that I believe a parent can give their child is chasing their dreams. Because in chasing your dreams, oftentimes you teach your children that it's possible to chase their dreams. And my dad and mom did that very, very well. They modeled that in front of me. And so I grew up in an entrepreneurial home. And then, I go to college and get out and I go into corporate America. And as a young man, I had a lot of dreams and vision and wanted to really make a difference. And you get into big corporate environments and there's just not a lot of room for innovation. There's not a lot of room for a young guy that has a lot of ideas. And so what I found is I fit better in the mold of an entrepreneur that was modeled for me as a child. And so I'm very, very grateful to parents who, even though they had their ups and downs and they struggled, they really did show me a path where resilience and grit and, this kind of fortitude of sticking things out can pay off. And, I'll be forever grateful for that, because that is the original origin story is really that I had parents that modeled it for me. And so I didn't have to go through it as a first generation entrepreneur. I got to go through it as a second or third generation entrepreneur.
I love that perspective. And something that resonated to, I think it was one of maybe your co-host or co-founder. Like, I work for the family business. So I'm a second generation, let's say, family business owner. And I totally resonate with you. But people usually see the upside of the story you just told, right? Like the success
Yeah.
of the parents and the company they built.
Yeah.
And they completely miss the sacrifices. And even, I don't know about your parents, but even, thank God, my father built a successful company, but in a way, he never feels he's as successful as the company is, just because it was so much of a struggle. And I inherited a bit of that too, where people see it and they think, wow, and all this. But then they also say, well, but you have it easy because it's your father did it. And they kind of miss or minimize a little bit the effort and the extra weight that somebody that comes from that legacy has to prove, to the world that actually you have something to bring to the table, and it's just your parents that are giving you, the jump start. Did any of that happen to you at all?
Absolutely. I'm really kind of like a third generation real estate investor, my grandfather and my father. And so what they don't realize is that oftentimes with a parent that's successful, and my dad was successful, my mom's successful, comes an expectation that you have to live up to. And so there's a shadow that's cast. And, my dad definitely cast a shadow. And so there's this feeling of that, a feeling of, expectation and, trying to validate yourself to try to at least reach their levels. But my parents were so gracious in that they really never set an expectation for me. There was never a bar. They said, you're not successful unless you reach this. But also, in an entrepreneurial home, my parents gave up a lot of time with their kids to build that business. It's like my dad wasn't at every football game and basketball game, and he wasn't able to be at everything. He was at the important ones for me, and he would have conversations with me about like which ones are important, which ones do you want me to be at, because he couldn't be at everyone because he was building this thing, and so you know, as a child that grows up in a second or third generation home of an entrepreneur, you sacrifice a lot. You sacrifice time, you sacrifice sometimes connection. Like you oftentimes there's a path or an expectation that you have to meet, or else you feel like you're not validated. And my parents really did a great job at then modeling that as well. Like while my dad wouldn't be able to come to every sports activity I was involved in, he would constantly talk to me about like, well, which ones are important to you? And he would always, put those things first while, also making sure that he was present in the business he was building. And then, they really worked hard on, me creating my own identity, like who is Eddie and what makes you successful. And you don't have to follow the family business. You don't have to follow this path. And I went the exact opposite, but in the end, it's those life lessons you learn that, now I own a lot of businesses, and I do repeat some of the same mistakes my parents made with my kids, but I've also learned from some, and I've tried to make that better.
Well, the fact that you're aware and vigilant about it, I think it's already, a great thing. And it cannot, we cannot have it all. And I always say you can all, in my case, as a woman, it's like I have my mom's example as a housewife. I'm thriving for that. And I'm thriving for my dad's example as an entrepreneur. At some point, it's like something's got to give. But I think once you have those milestones, and it sounds like you have that example and also with your kids, I think it makes the kids more resilient, because that's what your parents seem to have done with you in terms of focusing on the important things. So to me, that's fascinating. I could talk about that just because I relate to that. But then you went on and you say, a corporate world is not for me. I'm going to do my own thing. Was it clear to you? Because I read it, and I'm pretty sure the number of businesses was not correct, because it's so many that probably you exited a few a few more after the 90. But
Yeah.
you've done a lot. Is there anything that you set up yourself to do, or you kind of got into creating value in all these businesses and then exiting them? How did you become the king of exits?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story because as I left corporate America, I started an advertising agency, mainly because I was in TV and radio and it was an easier path. I already knew the clientele, I knew what I could go into. So it wasn't completely outside of what I was doing, it was just a step past it. But then I was trying to source capital because I had grown so much that I needed money to grow further. And a couple of Wall Street executives took advantage of me, and I ended up having to sell my company because of I don't need to go into the whole story, but the way that they did it was they offered capital, and then I overextended myself. Then I got to the table where it was time to sign, and they said, "Hey, we're not going to give you the capital." And we're going to buy your company. And I said, no, I don't want you to buy. And they said, but if we back out, you're going to go bankrupt. So you don't have a choice. And so it's kind of these corporate raider types that, Wall Street execs that really took advantage of me. This is in my 20s. But they still were fair on the valuation that they bought my company for. So I got 7 times EBITDA, and which, still was very fair for the company that I had. And what I realized was, wait a minute, if I would have done, for anybody that's not, familiar with those terms, I got a 7 times multiple of what I earned in EBITDA earnings before, interest, tax, amortization, whatever the EBITDA stands for. And so they gave me 7 times. Well, what that means is that I could have done the same exact thing for the next 7 years. And essentially they gave me 7 years of pay in that exit. And it dawned on me like there's not a better investment than building a company and getting a multiple without having to actually execute or do the work. I grew up in a real estate family, and you can't find a 7 times EBITDA on a real estate deal. So it's like I went down that path of like, wait a minute, I can create value and then I could sell these at a multiple and essentially live the life that I wouldn't be able to live, today, 7 years from now. And so like I felt like I was shrinking down time. So I started doing that and I started buying companies, growing companies, selling companies. And that just became a part of what I was doing. And, I've really perfected that process in either starting companies or buying companies, adding value to them, growing their value, and then exiting them. And so now I'm actually over 120 companies exited now. Like it's just been growing and I've been doing it a lot. And it's been a really amazing journey. But being taken advantage of and going through that very, very difficult time actually sparked the idea of I could actually turn this into something very powerful. And then I made a promise to myself that day when they took advantage of me and I signed the documents selling my company. I said, number one, I'm never going to sit over on this side again because, I don't want to be taken advantage of anymore. I'm going to learn this game. I'm going to figure this out. They obviously were playing a game, a much smarter game than I was, and I didn't know what they were doing. So I thought I'm not gonna be ignorant to this anymore. And number two, I said when I actually learn this game, I'm gonna be fair. I'm not gonna do what they did and hurt people. I'm gonna actually come up with a win-win situation. So in every company I've bought or I've sold, there's an ability for everyone to win at the table. You don't have to take advantage of people in order to win. And so that's kind of the two promises I made. And today now, Forbes and others have called me the king of exits because I've sold so many companies. But it's really what I learned in the bad times that gave me that path forward.
That's fascinating. It kind of resonates when you do good, then the good comes back to you in a different way. And I know that that's part of the whole Aspire message, which I enjoyed when I was there. That yes, again, you can make money because I think a lot of people have some sort of trauma or some sort of like money is bad and all these labels that we give to money, especially if you're a person of faith, which I think I know you are because I read. I would love to discuss a little bit what faith has played in this role. But when you are a person of faith, then you also feel a little bit guilty about like, yeah, you want to do good, but and I think that's where philanthropy comes in your case, And in the case of many, it's like serving others, do good for others. And so finding this model that really works. I know that that time, I mean, having time, it's also big for you in all you do. Can you talk a little bit that as time as a precious resource, but also as a formula for success? Because I think you embed it so well in everything I read.
Yeah, time is one of the things I focus on. One of the, lessons I learned from my father was that if you really value time, you'll begin to if you really believe that time is your most valuable asset, you will begin to look at the exchange of time versus the exchange of money or dollars. Most people are focused on the exchange of money, currency. I've tried to hyper focus on the exchange of time. And my dad, growing up in his home, he was very specific on that. Like, for instance, when I bought my first car, I was 16 years old. I went home. I said to my dad, this car is $1,800. He said, no, the car is not $1,800. He said, how much do you make an hour? And I said, well, I make $5 an hour. And he said, and how many hours a week do you work? And I said, well, I work 10. He said, okay, so you have $50 per week. He said, now divide that into 1,800. And he said, think about this is an equation of time. This is how much of my life I'm giving away to gain this car. Is this car worth this much of my life? Not, is it worth $1,800? He said, is it worth the time that you put into? And, of course, at 16, just having a car was worth everything. I would have given up everything for it. But that's how he framed it for me. It was like, are you willing to give up this much of your life to exchange it for whatever it is that you're buying or you're going after? And so much of my day and my daily practice today is based on that. Like, is this time, this resource, this precious resource worth trading? Is my life worth trading for the thing that I'm pursuing? So my meetings are all governed through that. My purchases are governed through that. My activities are governed through that. Because, for me, if we chase the value of time versus the value of money, the result is you end up gaining money. You end up gaining wealth. If you hyper focus on only exchanging your time for things of value, then all of a sudden you begin to increase the income based on your time. And what I find is my father used to say this too. He said he's like, if you chase wealth, it almost often or almost always will elude you. If you chase exchanging value for your time, wealth is almost always the byproduct. And so I hyper focus on making sure that I understand the value of my time and what I exchange my time for, and being very, very vigilant and diligent in making sure that I only exchange time for things that actually have value.
That's very powerful and almost like a gift to me, because I know that, and knowing that you say yes to be on a podcast that aims that inspires people, it's, the very, very, it's a compliment, but also, I'm surrounded by so many in the corporate world where they often think there's no time for that. I personally been criticized because I run a telecom company, and they say, well, what do you get out of the podcast? And I say, inspire conversations. If I can get somebody else to listen to this, and I know, especially in you're a well-known person, and they say, wow, if Eddie says that I should focus on how I use my time, and you're super wealthy, right? Then we might be able to change the mindset of, if you're not working and you're not producing, it's a waste of time. And
Right.
that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges we have as human beings is, if I cannot see the return, immediate return of how much am I going to make? Like, I don't know how many times I don't make money out of my podcast and people say, why do you do it? Like, they cannot wrap their head about 5 years into it. But at the end of this conversation, I feel full.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's one ripple effect I like to put out there, that, for those of you that are focusing only on producing and the monetary value, listen to the king of exits on this advice in terms of time. Now, of course, building these companies operating, you said you manage, if I say 6,000, it's probably 10,000. What are traits that you look for in your teams, in the people you surround yourself with, and what's one of the things that you maybe emphasize the most in the culture of the companies you help build?
Yeah. Patrick Lencioni, who's a great business author, He gives this equation of three characteristics that you want in people, and I've followed that now for probably close to 15 years. Is he said that every person you want to surround yourself with should be hungry, humble, and smart. I hire off of those things. Now I hire off of core values as well. I need to make sure that they align with my core values. What I'm looking for is people that are driven, hungry. They want more out of life. They want more. They want to advance. Like what I don't want is complacent people. I don't want people to come into my world where I have to motivate them. I want them to come in self-motivated. So that hungry part, that desire, that passion. And so whether I'm hiring or I'm looking for business partners or whether I'm investing in people, I invest in a lot of, I always say you invest in the jockey, not the horse. But I'm looking for those hungry people, those people that are still have a zest and a passion for more. Humble is really important because humble, I always, like I very much believe that everything you want is on the other side of your ego. It's a great book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. And, he talks about this, we create these beliefs about ourselves that outpace who we really are. And when we do that, then it puts a wall up for learning. And so when my ego is too strong, then I don't need to learn anything. I don't need to absorb anything. I don't need to listen to anyone. When I put down my ego, then every man's my teacher. Every opportunity is an opportunity to learn. Every, situation gives me a chance to advance. And that's what I want in myself, but I also want that in the people around me. Those people that walk in humility, not humility like meekness, but humility like strength, like they know who they are, but also have a passion to advance and know that there's somebody that knows something more than they do. And then lastly, I want smart people. I want people that have a high level of intelligence, people that can carry a high level of cognitive skill. They come with information and knowledge and wisdom. That's important because, a lot of people in this day and age because of chat GPT on your phone or because of the internet can position as if they are smart, but you have to get to the root of it is like, do they actually possess intelligent? And we need to be hiring intelligent people. Intelligence needs to be elevated. People that do apply themselves, have a baseline of knowledge, can speak with authority, allows you to advance very, very quickly.
So powerful. That's so powerful. And I can see it resonating into what you have created. I mean, I definitely gonna listen to your podcast. I admit that I did not know that you have a podcast, but we're gonna have the link in the show notes.
Sure.
But talking about the Aspire, because it's something that I did experience, what was your vision for it? And what's your goal? I know you touched so many, I mean, because this is a tour that goes, all over. So I think what I found is that the whole day is prepared very, very curated by the speakers you bring to the table in terms of getting people that want more. I think based on your definition is those that are hungry for learning. Teach me what is the secret formula. How do I do this? And at the end, that to me was like, there's no secret formula. There are things you can learn, but at the same time, you just have to be open to receive and showing up at the end of the day. You have to show up and say, I want more. So what did you envision when you helped co-found the Aspire?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll explain that in just a second. But one thing to reiterate what you just said is there's a book about why hard things are hard, or the hard things about hard thing by Horowitz. And he says that in life, there's rarely a silver bullet, but there's always 10,000 lead bullets. You win a war by 10,000 lead bullets than this like one singular idea or this one singular shot, the silver bullet. To your point, oftentimes it's just about showing up every day. It's not about this one secret that this formula, if I have, oftentimes it's just about being present and being present all the time. And that is the message of Aspire. So Aspire, really is was Andrew Cordell and myself. That's my partner there. We wanted to take aspiring entrepreneurs and people that really were hungry, like you said, and searching, and put examples of success that were authentic, that they could see the path forward. And so, if you notice, like I try to put every, we have men and women, and we have different races, and I want every person to come there and identify with somebody on the stage and say, wow, like that person's like me, or, wow, that was a piece that I was missing. And so what I'm trying to do is just expose them to success and, no matter what the package is, it's similar, And then one of the things that we demand from our speakers, so whether they're the highest level of celebrity of, like we've had Kevin Costner and Kevin Hart and Shaquille O'Neal and all the Sharks, Kevin O'Leary and Mark Cuban. We've had all these guys on our stage, but one thing that we bring them back over and over again if they're authentic, because that authenticity, being able to share what made me successful and what prevented my success, is a powerful tool for the listener who's sitting there thinking about growing their business or advancing. And then for us, I wanted to create a massive entrepreneurial society. And so everything we do moves into, the Aspire Tour is called the world's largest business tour because we do it every single month across the nation. We're 32 months in a row right now. And we have 2 to 5,000 people, and we've had bigger ones than that, but the average is 2 to 5,000 that show up. We put big celebrities on stage, and we'll do that, at least through next year. And with that, it's like we've created the world's largest mastermind. We have over 3,000 members in our mastermind that are like-minded entrepreneurs who are moving forward, who are passionate, and we've created just an amazing community. And that was the goal of the Aspire Tour, is really to put really great people, authentic people on stage, and then to assemble people that want to learn. Now, the last piece of that is the purpose side, which is now why do we assemble this community? And we assemble the community because what we really want is to make impact on the world. And so we always start the Aspire Tour with me speaking about my nonprofit and how you could have the greatest success in the world, but if you don't find somebody else's life to impact, then you're still going to be left without fulfillment. That fulfillment comes with making impact on someone's life, not making a dollar. Like you can make money, but if there's no impact created, you'll still feel a lack of fulfillment. Like I did with, all the success I had, I lacked fulfillment. And then I went into the nonprofit side and started building, orphanages and feeding centers and wells and all that type of stuff. And so we lead Aspire with that, which is like if we can give you a pathway to success, don't just spend that success on yourself, like find a way to make impact on someone else's life.
And honestly, that's what resonated the most with me when I had the opportunity to do it, because you don't see a lot of that. Like you see a lot of, yeah, I help, but it's almost mostly people that write a check and
Right.
then just get it over with, But I could sense that definitely in Aspire, but also in you as a human being, this philanthropy, it's really something you live by. And I wonder, was this something instilled through your family, or just like you say, when you lack fulfillment, you came into it? Is it your faith? Because this is something I find that service to others, as simple as it sounds, is a hard one to develop. And some people either come or others go through very traumatic experiences in life, and then you're called to serve. Like most people get involved in charity, unfortunately, when a dear one dies from an unfortunate disease, and then they get involved, like when it touches you personally. So
Yeah.
what was that journey for you?
The journey was being on the mountaintop, having all this money and exits, and feeling a lack of fulfillment, and realizing there's got to be. I grew up in a very faith-based household. Like my parents were very much people of faith, and we went to church and things like that. But that was, in my opinion, their experience, not mine.
Mm-hmm,
And it
mm-hmm,
was their world. It wasn't my world.
mm-hmm.
And I got to this place where later in life, after I had the exits, I really was searching and trying to figure out like, there's got to be more to life than another house, another vacation, another car, like another win, another successful exit. And really was a place of searching for me, of just trying to find meaning, trying to find what value do I have in this life other than just making money? Because, that really doesn't fulfill me. It doesn't give me satisfaction. Um, and I really have never been money driven. I've always been very success driven. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to create. I wanted to do big things. But even that just didn't provide a lot of success. So really two things. One, a lack of fulfillment drove me to trying to discover what is fulfillment in my life. And that serving others was the step towards fulfillment. Now, there was a traumatic experience in my life that then drove me towards the type of fulfillment that I have. And a lot of us, that's where it's like something happened. And it could be, trauma really could be anything. It doesn't have to be the loss of a loved one or getting cancer or something like that. It could be small things. But, my brother, I lost two siblings. I've had two siblings pass away. And my brother, had a very, very strange disease, a very rare disease where he was normal and everything was going well, and then he had a seizure, and then the doctor said, "Oh, he has this disease, and he's actually gonna progress or digress towards like until he's like completely, he won't be able to take care of himself and things like that." And so my brother ended up in a wheelchair at probably I would say 8, 9 years old. And I watched a perfectly normal, amazing little boy, and I was the oldest, who was loved, all of a sudden be looked at by the world as something different. Like they didn't understand, And so like as he became very much special needs, my parents had to do everything for him. He couldn't speak, and my parents had to feed him and, go, wheel him around in a wheelchair. And I watched the world love him as a little boy, and I watched the world almost reject him. And when you're experiencing that as a child, and you watch like, man, to me, I loved him. I like there was nothing wrong with him. Like I just loved him. He was my brother, and he was just going through a difficult time. And then you watch every, 10,000 looks of people, at Disney World looking at you like, what's wrong? And, like you just have this like experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what I started to really struggle with was those people who are looked at as less than or don't have representation. And and what I found is the very first time I went to more of like a missions type trip, and a friend of mine had an orphanage, and I saw these children that weren't being fed. He could feed some, but he didn't have enough money to feed them all. And like he had a feeding center, um, and I saw these kids that weren't represented. Like they were as lovable as any other child on the planet, but they just didn't have somebody that saw their need or represented them or would stand up for them or go, would sacrifice on their behalf. And then so that was my first step of like, oh, I can give to that. I could take care of this need. And then the fulfillment I received out of like, man, taking care of someone else and doing something for someone that couldn't do something for me gave me this joy that I hadn't felt before. And so then I just started walking down that path. And now we're in 103 countries, and we feed and educate about 5,300 children every single day around the world. I literally just got back from my orphanage in Mexico last night. And to me now, everything I do is anchored into that purpose. And that's kind of the message of Aspire is like, hey, let me tell you how I came to fulfillment. And that was I got outside of looking at my own needs, my own desires, and I started realizing there's a world around me. And then there was kind of like this calling that was tied to my past and to what I experienced in life that now giving into that gave me a sense of fulfillment that I never felt before. And, I think that that was the journey that I was on that really changed everything for me.
I thank you for sharing that. It's very powerful, and explains a sensitivity in you that it's not common to explore or to express. And I really think that the world needs more Eddie Wilsons for sure. Because the world, obviously, it's when you realize the wealth that is accumulated in just a very top. We forget that. I mean, I'm Venezuelan, and one of the things I usually tell people that ask me about is every time I went to university, I had to drive through a slum. Mm-hmm. We weren't allowed to forget how blessed we were by being able to go to school, but because these countries, and of course, Mexico City, Mexico in general, many poor countries, they are so intertwined that the good and the wealthy and the poor, and you don't see often that in the U.S. The U.S. is very, my appreciation is that we're very good here at keeping, a little bit everything separated, and people do forget that there's so much need out there. And so when you do something so much for others and encourage those that are making it, that yes, they're wealthy, but to help others, that's such a powerful message. And I definitely could sense it by participating in Aspire. So I mean, I know I could talk to you forever. You're a very busy man. I want to give you, Eddie, an opportunity. I know you're an author, you speak on stages, you have so many nonprofits that you're involved with. What is a project or something that maybe we haven't touched upon? I warn you, it's not so much about money and the exits. I know that maybe you speak a lot about that, but to us, it's about journey, here at Back to Basics and what makes us tick. So, what's making you tick these days?
Yeah. So one of the big things that as I've been on this journey in creating this program, Impact Others. Impact Others is the nonprofit. I wanted to honor the experiences that I had in life because the experiences I had in life taught me so much. But it's not about honoring the good times, and it's not the trophies. And so I really have been deep diving into why I was in that, like why God allowed me to go through what I went through and how I could better use that. And um, so this past year, I was actually on a trip to Colombia. I always take business owners with me to all these trips because I want them to just see it and experience it. And I was sitting there with a business owner, and she owns a bunch of yoga studios in California, and she was telling me, she was asking me like, why orphans? Like, why do you pick orphans? And I told her the story of Dakota, my brother, and she said, have you ever honored him by giving you that experience? And I said, no, I never have. I said, like, I have the orphans. And she said, I think that you should do something in his name. She said, because if you think about it, like, what better, like, instead of looking at, the experience I had with my brother as a negative experience that I'm trying to overcome, she was like, what have you looked at as the most positive experience you've ever experienced and honor it? And I was like, that's a great thought. And so I really put some thought into it. And I thought, and I started talking to my regional directors who oversee the orphanages and stuff like that. And I said, you know, when are the kids most not, when do they feel the least represented? And they all came back and said Christmas and their birthdays, like because they know the rest of the world have a celebration on Christmas. And he was like, and a lot of them are like, the best that we can do, we still can't provide a Christmas morning for them, or we don't always have gifts for them, or we don't. So we kind of just don't talk about it. It's just another day. And I was like, wow. I was like, well, what if this Christmas we gave every orphan, every child that we serve a Christmas morning, gifts, food, love, happy, like, and so I started off on that journey, but then I felt like we could do better than that. And so I said to them, how many kids are we turning away that we don't have space for that if we provided them a Christmas morning, we could provide a Christmas morning for? Well, right now we feed and educate about 5,300 a day. Well, all of them came back and they counted all the ones that are in the community that they could serve, and they came back with 18,000. They said we could actually serve 18,000.
Wow.
And I knew I have to do it, so this Christmas it's called Project Dakota, and starting in mid-November, we will start the process and we'll actually give Christmas morning to over 18,000 orphans around the world, most of them who have never experienced Christmas before. And so we're going to give them toys and love and food and a celebration, and so we're going to give 18,000 orphans Christmas. And so we're in a huge planning phase right now of like making sure that logistically, I mean, like you think about it, like we're giving 2 or 3 toys to every child. And, so we're trying to figure out how to buy 40, 50,000 toys. And it's like, the food and just like the logistics of it is crazy. And so we're actually doing that all around the world. And that's a big thing. And I'm gonna fly to so many of the sites and get to do Christmas morning with a bunch of the kids. And
Wow.
so it's very exciting. And so, if anybody wanted to help or volunteer or be a part of that, they could always go to the website impactothers.com, and they could see our Project Dakota, which is named after my brother, where I'm gonna this Christmas turn that experience into something amazing. Like the gift that God gave me and my brother wasn't wasn't something negative. It's the most positive thing that's ever happened to me. And even though it was a traumatic experience, if we take those traumatic experiences and we turn them into impact around the world, then they become something to celebrate, not something to mourn. And so that's what we're doing this Christmas.
Wow. If that doesn't make anybody tick, then you're dead already. Start having goosebumps. Hey, what an amazing initiative. And to me, what's exciting too, that is Christmas Day. So it's
Yeah.
knowing that there's also a faith component in a way there, where
Yes.
it's gonna be something that a lot of kids are gonna
Yeah.
remember, that it's an important day
Right.
for the world, and that they get to celebrate it for the first time. That's extremely inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. It will be on the show notes, Eddie. I myself am going to check it out because it sounds, especially thank you also for all you do for Latin America. This is the region I grew up in, and so special thanks, because we are often forgotten. So I want to thank you. I have one very question. It's the last one of all my interviews. This is a big project. It makes you tick. What is the one thing that in those days when you get doubting yourself, or you're drained and you handle so much, and you probably say, I don't know if I have the energy. What is the one practice, one thing that you do to reconnect to your soul?
Yeah. I thankfully I have all these places around the world. The last 30 days have been a rough 30-day time period in my businesses and just stress and everything else. And so I took a group of people to Mexico this like yesterday, and we just got back yesterday. And we went and hung out with the orphans and played soccer, and we threw a birthday party for the kids, and we just had a great time, because you cannot look at an orphan and like in most of these, most people think of like an orphan as like a 4-year-old little boy who's been abandoned. And while we do serve those, it's not just that. It's girl, like we just got a group of girls that were being held as captive by the cartel, that were 13, 14, 15 years old. And the government did a raid, and we ended up getting these girls. And, it's like they're orphans too. They don't have parents. Their parents have been killed. These girls have been, horrible things have been done to these girls. And, it's like you're serving them. And so, like, you can't look in the face of a child who has no mom, has no dad, has no one to love them except for you, and think that there's anything else in the world that matters more. And so the gift I've been given is in serving. All I have to do is look at these children and realize that there's nothing in my life that is as bad as potentially what they've been through. And there's nothing more rewarding than serving these kids that have never been served before. And so that's those little things. Like all I have to do is refocus on that. And you could have the worst day you've ever had. You could be diagnosed with a horrible disease, and yet it's still, it's perspective. And I've been given the gift of perspective. I get to look at 5,000 orphans on a daily basis and say, you know what? I could have been in their situation. Like, thank God that I've been given the opportunity that I have, because, now I can serve them. And it's like, it's always perspective.
Well, I will tell you, after 350 interviews, if I had a bell, I would ring it, because there are very few what makes me take answers that I haven't heard before. And perspective is one I haven't heard before. And it's a really good one. So I thank you for that, Eddie, for sharing. Very, very powerful. Well, thank you so much. I know our audience I'm sure they're going to enjoy it as much as I have. And thank you for all you do, and for showing up for others. That's incredible work. And I'm very grateful for you to taking the time today to be with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to be on here.
Thank you. And until a new episode of Back to Basics. Bye-bye. You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit leticialatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.